Hello, hello, Ryan, Brett. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Brett, I think you're double muted.
As per
Technology.
usual. Yeah, no, it's going well on my side too, Grant, Ryan. Good to see you guys.
Very good. We jumped on here a couple minutes before the stream, and I have to give Brett a hard time because he was double muted when we jumped on too. So it was right on cue.
As rehearsed, even.
Very good. Well, we want to obviously let everybody know, we got a guest here on the stream today, but we'll just do some brief introductions for folks that maybe haven't been on the stream before, folks who are new to the recordings right after the fact. So we'll just do some introductions. I'm Grant Melstead. I'm a Microsoft technology specialist. Been at Microsoft for a little over 8 years. Work primarily in the public sector space, so state and local government. But really focus on everything Microsoft 365, whether security, compliance, productivity, anything in the M365 suite is what I cover. So Ryan, you want to jump in next?
Yeah. So Ryan Parsons, I'm a customer success account manager. So I work with state and local governments with their unified support accounts. Been here about 3 years now at Microsoft, and prior to that, worked for the city of Boulder in Colorado. So come from the SLG space. Now I support the SLG space. So we're going to talk about some stuff that is not available for government yet, but will be one day. So Bret promises. But really excited to talk about all the new security stuff we've got coming out and take advantage of.
Brett, you want to say hi, introduce yourself?
Yeah, I will. Hey, everybody. My name's Bret Eustapak. I'm a modern work technical specialist, work for Microsoft. I actually got my start back in working with Office 365 back when we launched it from a product called BPOS back in the days. So I've been around for a long time. I worked in support for quite a while, working with SharePoint. And then back in 2018, so about 6 years ago now, I moved to the sales organization. I actually help customers understand our Microsoft products and get familiar with their capabilities and those items. So I got a chance to get a little bit more proactive with my support work and helping folks get the things they need at the time before they need them so that it's ready to go when it comes up. So it's a pleasure to be here, team. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for letting me give my intro there.
Yeah, of course. Well, I have a tornado siren going off in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you?
I can.
You can.
Yep.
Well, I'll mute myself, but Ryan, maybe you just want to kick it off. I mean, we're talking about Entra Suite today.
Yeah. So this is going to be the Bret show for a while here as we talk about this. But this is a new suite of features that was announced a month ago. I don't think how long ago this we kind of announced this.
Yeah,
but
the GA was announced sometime mid-July for the Entra Suite, which is really cool. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah. So do we want to walk through what those features, like what the features are, right? Just by list, and then we can sort of talk about individually what they look like and where the value is in them, right? We're not going to get into like deep demos today. The goal is just to sort of at a broad level cover the suite, talk about what it looks like, and then maybe talk about just some sort of general guidelines on how you can use it more effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key takeaway here is if you do have a Microsoft 365 tenant that is commercial, you can absolutely access Entra Suite today. Even some of the features that we're going to talk about are available in the multitude of tenants and can be standalones as well. So, Ryan, to that point, let's just kind of talk about a high level overview of what's in that big bundle of Entra Suite. We just recently had that name change from Azure Active Directory to Entra ID. So Entra Suite is kind of a premium set of capabilities on top of the generic Entra ID, or what was known as Azure Active Directory premium capabilities. So a couple of the components that are in there, high level, is our zero trust network access controls. So zero trust at a high level at the networking layer and at the identity layer. So we have Entra private access and Entra internet access available within the Entra Suite. Those are ways that you can control access to your devices, to your networking objects, and from specific devices and networking objects. So you can start segmenting your internal networks at layers that allow you to kind of MFA between network hops or MFA between a device and a network server in a more comprehensive way, that level of zero trust being enhanced with those private access and internet access capabilities.
And then we move past that, right? So we're looking at that point where we're securing the flow of information. And then there's three big identity-specific features there, right? So Entra ID governance, Entra ID protection, and then Entra verified ID.
Yeah.
Part of this as well.
Yeah, let's unpack that bundle here as well. So identity governance is pretty cool in and of itself, because the concepts have been built in at different layers in Entra ID. So the idea of identity governance is a multifaceted approach to users onboarding and offboarding from your organization across their entire life cycle. So if you're using HR tools and applications to do your user provisioning, you can use the identity governance capabilities to link up those identity lifecycle workflows and enhance that user's experience with their onboarding. So HR hires a resource, they know that resource is going to exist, they're in their system, yes, they're an employee. Now we can provision that user access into Microsoft 365. You can control that user's access by ensuring that they're granted capabilities that every user of your org has, and by going through a registration process. Even this touches a little bit on verified ID. So you can link verified ID into this identity governance and registration process, and also hand out a digital credential to this user right away to essentially provide them a digital badge or an entry point that allows you to validate them as an employee and as a resource, and for them to represent themselves to other organizations as an employee in your organization and as a valid resource. So verified ID is really cool. But finishing up on the identity governance just a little bit before we dive into that further, we also have the ability to do entitlement management, which is where different groups of users in your departments might have different expectations for attesting that they should have access to certain data sets or certain applications. Or, for example, a user might move from one department to another, get promoted to a higher tier, and need additional access. Identity governance is comprehensive of all of those concepts. So you can create entitlement management practices where you're creating packages and sending them out to these groups of users. Obviously, that links in with the identity lifecycle workflows, where a user gets hired, they're in a department, they get access, everybody's happy. But it also works for ongoing access requirements. A lot of our customers have really strong certification needs or compliance needs or seats, and you don't want to have resting access for any point of time that you're not intended to have that access. So if an employee leaves the organization and they're no longer a member of this group, how have you removed their user account from having that access and reduce that risk? And that's another component of the identity governance that comes into play here to give you a really comprehensive approach to that whole posture, from the impetus of a user getting hired all the way through to their final day or moving on to a new team.
I'll say, like, on the real world side of this, something we saw a lot in my last role was when they hired someone, we would say, whose permissions do you want to copy for this new user? Right. And maybe, they hired Grant's replacing me. So they would just say, yep, copy Ryan's permissions, which seems easy to do. But what if I came from a different department first and you didn't remove my, city attorney's office permissions before I came to IT? Well, now Grant's getting permissions for a different department he doesn't need permissions for. Right. You end up with these really convoluted sets of permissions that sort of build up over time as you do this. And so the ID governance, the verified ID is another big one we'll talk about in a minute. But like, all these things tie into this idea that it lets you be much more streamlined, more focused, and keep things more secure without overburdening your staff to maintain that. Because a lot of times, right, staff time becomes the bottleneck for a lot of these security processes. It just takes so much time to vet all this stuff and go through all these processes. Correct. So let's do it better. right? Let's be smart about how we do this stuff. And here's some tools we have that can help that process. So,
Yeah,
Ryan, just curious to jump in quick. So, I mean, what I hear, right, and I'm obviously the non-technical one out of you two, but really what it sounds like is we're trying to, automate as much as possible. Obviously secure, right? But then how about from like the actual end user perspective? Is there any value benefit that end users would get out of like this suite of solutions, whether it's just efficiencies of when they're onboarded or they do change roles, or like how about from an end user perspective? Is there anything in here that jumps
I
out or
mean,
maybe valuable?
yeah, the governance piece helps because it means they don't have to spend as much time trying to get the right permissions from day one, right? So the benefit there is, we didn't give you too many permissions to start with and forget to give you the right permissions you actually needed because no one had that in the right place. But as Bret mentioned, the verified ID, I think that's where the real user experience win comes in. Right? We talked about like self-service password reset, Windows Flow for Business, a couple of these bigger security tools you have access to. Verified ID is sort of the next level of that. So I don't know if you want to talk about that for a minute. I think that's a really impressive tool to have access to.
Yeah, let me build that into the streamline experience conversation that we're on here, because Ryan, to your point, and Grant, to your question, I think what we end up finding is that users themselves benefit from the streamlined approach, right? They're able to have trust essentially in their admin team that they got hired, they're an employee that exists, they have an identity on their first day, they have access to the tools they need on their first day. If they move departments or if they move to another location, their access is removed and now they have access to the new things at the new department. So like from an employee experience, that's a really solid win effectively. You're putting in less blockers for your users across that process. I think of all the different roles I started before even my career at Microsoft, and then some of the times being here. As you move departments or move roles, it can take a while for you to get access to those capabilities, and that can cause pain points and friction for your users, but also for your admin staff. This concept of identity governance, and we'll dovetail that in nicely to the verified ID here in a moment, but this concept of identity governance is really about improving your process in an automated way so admins can focus more of their time on being diligent and observing for threats or vulnerabilities or other sorts of security risks that they can address proactively versus having to deal with the day in and day out of permissions management and those items. You can leverage the tools at your disposal to offboard a lot of that work. And again, as I specified, you're bringing in the user experience in a really kind of comprehensive and concise way where they're not getting additional roadblocks or delays in their access to anything. Um, Here's the cool part about the verified ID. You can build in to your identity governance workflow that the user needs to register a verified ID, meaning, and I just went through this recently again, so I got the process down pretty well, but essentially I, as an admin, can just publish out which users can create verified IDs. As part of the identity governance workflow, you can build that as a step into the workflow process so that after your user is onboarded, after they've registered their MFA and gotten their device and checked their access to tools, you can ensure that they create a verified ID. When I did that, it was as simple as scanning the authenticator app against a QR code on the screen after I provided my MFA access. It trusted who I was, and I got a little badge, a little Contoso badge for my demo environment that I could add to my Google Wallet or my Authenticator app as a verified ID. So I effectively get a digital representation of that badge to take with me. Oh, hey, do you work for Contoso Limited? I do. Here's my badge. It's right here on my phone. Oh, can I scan that and verify you are who you say you are? Yes, you can. That's part of the API interface with verified ID. So if you're an organization and you work with a lot of other organizations, when you go to your respective sites at the other org site, when you go to their buildings, when you try and purchase a tool from them or try and get access to their air conditioner room to do repair, when you do those things, how do you prove you are who you say you are? Verified ID is a great way to do that. And there's another concern that comes along with that of, well, if I'm giving out these credentials, willy-nilly, how am I going to control this sprawl if everybody can just have an ID with my environment? Well, you can tell which groups are allowed to access to create that verified ID. You can rescind those verified IDs based on your business model and the APIs that are out there that invalidate those credentials so that they're not able to go back and check against your service in Entra and verify that is the user they say they are. We've also got some interesting components in verified ID, like a face ID match. If you create a verified ID with reference to like a badge credential, you can include a photo. You can include photo ID with that to respectively validate that that user is who is on that credential before you issue that credential to them. So this is just a really robust set of tools in that realm and very integrated with the rest of the Entra and the identity suite.
Well, also you talk about like the user experience. Let's say you're a new employee getting onboarded. So you go to HR, they scan your passport or your driver's license. Well, we can now use that picture as part of the check for that verified ID. So now, hey Grant, you're hired. It's great. We're gonna have you sign in and start like doing some paperwork. How do we know we're really emailing you? Right. This is like a phishing mechanism we're seeing now from attackers. Right, is they will email you and say, hey, we've got this great job opportunity. Click this link to register. And they're going to basically capture those credentials. And now they're in as your new company. Well, no, it doesn't matter. You're going to use your phone, take a selfie, right? The system's going to look at your face, match it to that ID and go, yep. And this is not logging into a computer, right? This is not going to be as accurate as like Hello for Business. But the goal is looking at these two, letting the computer and AI verify that they look the same. Great. Right. Let's let you go ahead and finish MFA setup and off you go.
An extra level of assurance in the process.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ryan, on my ID though, I've got hair and a mustache. Is it still going to work?
You did yesterday too. Actually, yes, it will. It's shocking how well these systems work. I mean, I've run into issues because my old passport photo, I had full head of hair and no beard. And I have been pulled aside and like held for hours because I think my old passport photo at like random borders. But now I look like it. But people get real good at looking at just certain features, right? We can identify that stuff, and we've trained our computers to do the same thing, right?
Humans
How do the eyes,
remarkable.
the nose, the spacing? It's just so yeah. I mean, don't keep doing that, Grant, because it looks weird. But otherwise, you're fine.
I think that brings up a really interesting point, though, that you just talked about. The computers, right, are good at identifying who people are based on different characteristics, attributes, things like that. That's obviously on, hey, let's look at a picture, 2 pictures. It seems like the Microsoft ecosystem continues to expand. Like it wasn't that many years ago that it was like, yeah, okay, all right, yep, Microsoft has an MFA solution, but next they have, all these different solutions, continue to build out the ecosystem. And it seems like, I think you kind of wonder like, man, okay, are we just going to put everything in Microsoft? Is everything going to be Microsoft? I think kind of where I'm trying to tie this all around is when you have the traditional, disparate systems, right, that probably are siloed, there has to be something that connects them. And what is that usually? The piece that connects them is usually like a person, right? A person's analyzing, looking at things. Well, people make a lot of mistakes, right? Now, of course, computers can make mistakes too. But I think like when I look at this new Entra Suite, offering that we have, the build out of additional tools potentially removes the needs for other, solutions that customers have maybe used in the past, or maybe they haven't had a tool for it. Like when you can have these systems that are built for each other, work together, use AI, use machine learning, like especially around security, when you talk about the amount of threats that are coming in, the sophisticated attacks coming from, all over the world, like really the value in getting more things under the umbrella that work for each other, that are built for each other. It's interesting, and it's like becoming more and more apparent of why this stuff is so important to really have, working together, because it just works better.
Yeah, I
Well, and
think
also
Grant.
a lot of these
Go ahead, Ryan.
tools work with third-party solutions as well, right? Microsoft a while ago, I think, made an interesting shift where we've kind of said rather than trying to silo everything or sandbox it just in our environment, we're going to work with whoever, right? As long as you want to work with us, here's an API. Let's tie that into it, right? So verified ID works with other identity providers, right? So you don't have to run that in-house. You can use something else if you want to. And verified ID will just tie into that. You know, a lot of these tools will do that because we realize even if you don't get the whole thing, right? Maybe you get, you already have Entra ID P2, so you get some of these features already. Great, make use of them, right? You're already paying for a lot of the stuff already, so let's get you in the door and using it because it's going to make your environment better. It's going to make everyone safer, and so I appreciate that shift, right? It'd be really easy for us to just say, yeah, we don't work with anyone else, right? You want security, only come to us, and that's it. But we're not. No, we want you to, obviously. But if you don't, we're still going to be here to help.
We see that too, just in the on-prem Active Directory world versus what was again Azure Active Directory and is now Entra ID. The concept is you, as an organization, have typically had an Active Directory instance because you've run servers and applications and other capabilities. Your users are all sourced there. Other tools that you've built run off of those identities using LDAP queries or basic NTLM authentication. Over time, we found that the idea of an on-premise ecosystem isolated in and of itself doesn't necessarily add to enhanced security. So we came up with cloud hybrid enabled, where you have an on-prem Active Directory that can be secured, but can also be extensible. Entra ID Connect can take that and connect it up to your M365 or your Azure instance and provide you those linked identities in that case, where you have a user identity that can be verified with Entra ID, with permissions and entitlements that can be managed across your ecosystem, and with an extensible platform, to your point, Ryan, that you can integrate Entra ID to provide authentication to any of your applications or third-party services or your identity workflow for HR hiring processes, as we talked about with identity governance earlier. So there's a lot of extensibility in the platform today. The idea is no product or no service is in and of itself secure. It's about the practices you implement around it and how you integrate it with those other services as to how secure your platform can be. But I think, to your guys' points, Entra ID, Entra Suite offers a lot of those solutions in one pane of glass. Entra ID Premium 1 is the prerequisite, so a lot of folks usually have that as a baseline for conditional access and app proxy capabilities and some basic group management components and those items. But if you're interested in some of these enhanced capabilities, please consider Entra Suite because it adds a lot on top of that, or identity governance because it adds a lot of those controls on top. Both of those items are available in Entra Suite. Suite's pretty comprehensive. Yeah, it's really neat seeing the integration from all my time all those years ago with the start of BPOS and the start of the cloud footprint to now, where we have a really comprehensive security posture that can help our customers get to where they want to be.
So what else do you think? We've got about 5 minutes left. I mean, I think it's interesting, everybody loves Microsoft licensing. Of course, it's like, man, okay, there's an Entra ID plan 1, plan 2, there's a suite offering, but then, you can break the suite offering up into bundles.
Some of which are included in other license bundles.
Like M365, you get Entra.
Yeah.
P2, depending if you're E3, E5.
I think we see this emblematic of our M365 licensing as well. Whereas if you're an entity, a government entity or a education or a customer organization, a business, and you have one organization that you're one unified entity, you might find that you have IT sprawl of multiple different security products or multiple different identity solutions that you've gathered over time. I think one of the really comprehensive ways to look at Microsoft licensing is if you want all the automations and all the standard enterprise grade bells and whistles, your best bet is to go with the top tier of that suite, right? We find that with M365 licensing. E5 has phone and Power BI and additional capabilities in there. It's also got the compliance and the security suite and the full tier of all of those capabilities. Well, we really see that with Entra too, right? Entra ID Plan 1 is basic controls, conditional access capabilities, a little bit more than the free version, but nothing super ridiculous in terms of automation or security. But you do have some of those controls. Well, Entra ID Plan 2 gives you a little bit more in identity governance, gives you a bit more of identity protection, and also gives you a little bit of some of those automations and entitlement managements and identity governance with privileged identity management and those access packages. Where Entra Suite comes in is Entra Suite really adds the remainder of those premium components, right? Verified ID, Entra private access and internet access. That's 3 so far. We've also got some enhanced identity protection when you start building in verified ID and into your identity lifecycle workflows. That's when you get that enhanced identity protection as Grant prescribed, where you're seeing that across the lifecycle. So I think that kind of helps break it down. If you're looking for the full set of enterprise suite, you want to unify and deduplicate, I think Entra Suite is the way to go. Just like M365 Tier 5 would be the way to go. If you've got some additional products or capabilities spread across some other tools, maybe not the full size fit is right for you, but maybe one of those features might help contain the spread or enhance the compliance or the integration factor a little bit.
I appreciate that. It's a good explanation. Well, as we're gonna wrap up, I mean, any last call to actions you guys have? Are you aware of any, if we've got any additional webinar content, anything like that that's coming out regarding the suite in any more depth? I don't know if I've seen anything recently.
I believe our a lot of our this was in GA or in private preview and public preview for so long before it went GA that I think a lot of the Microsoft Mechanics YouTube channel have a lot of good information about this broken down on the different product layers. So now that we know, right, Verified ID Premium is in Entra Suite, we know the identity governance plan that was standalone is available in Entra Suite. Those items, I think the Microsoft Mechanics and the tech community blogs have a lot of that information out there. So now that we're GA with Entra Suite for the commercial entities, I think that we'll find a lot of that information in those locations and more coming soon too. This is a new product family, the suite of premium capabilities that we're talking about here. So I think there's a lot of potential in seeing how this unfolds, but the suite as it stands is really robust at this point in time as well.
Awesome. And I just dropped that Microsoft Mechanics YouTube page on the comment section here of the video on LinkedIn. So
excellent.
Folks want to jump to that, they can. And obviously, reach out to your Microsoft account team, reach out to your CSAM if you work with Ryan, reach out to your Microsoft partners. Obviously, everybody's going to be willing to help talk through it. But this is great. Anything else, guys?
No. Brett, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's always
Thanks,
great
team.
to have you involved because you bring a lot of knowledge to the table. So appreciate that.
We're hoping to have you back, Bret. So I know we had kind of spitballed a couple of other topic area ideas to maybe cover in the coming weeks and months.
We just need to launch another big suite of products for him to come back and talk about.
Feel free to maybe toss those into chat on the YouTube as well, or comments on the YouTube. If you guys want to see anything specifically, we can always plan around that as well. And I'm happy to come back, guys. Thanks for the invitation, and audience, thanks folks for watching and listening. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take it easy. See ya.
Bye, team.